The Canon G7X is a great compact little stills camera, but is it any good for shooting video? Here's my thoughts, including the pros and cons, using it as a vlogging camera and a couple of mods that I made to it for shooting video. Hi, I'm Grant. I have owned and been using this little Canon G7X for shooting video for about the past 3 months. This review though is essentially all about the video functions of this camera. If you're wanting to know more about the nitty-gritty and stills capabilities of this camera, there's plenty of great sites out there on the interweb. However, I'm a video guy and I am always biased towards the usability and practicality of actually using these things for shooting video in a real-world situation. I will give the pros and cons, or what I think are the pros and cons, a bit further on in this video. The reason I purchased this camera is that I was quite keen to give vlogging a crack. A lot of you out. Yeah. Right. Good night. And you can see a link, if you have a look on my YouTube channel, you can see some of my vlogging videos. So yeah, I'm not sure if I'm a good vlogger, but this camera has become very popular amongst vloggers due to the usage of it by such popular guys as Casey Neistat and Fun for Louie, who use this camera on their daily vlogs. Firstly, what is it? It is a compact stills camera. It has a 20 megapixel 1-inch image sensor. It has a zoom length with a 35mm equivalent range of 24 to 100 millimeters. It's got a metal body and it's fairly compact and robust. The main competitor to this camera would be the Sony RX100 Mark III, which is almost identical image sensor size and physical size actually. I haven't owned and tested a Sony RX100, so I can't really make any direct comparisons, but there's plenty of stuff out there on the interwebs. So who would use this camera for shooting video? As I mentioned earlier, it's very popular with vloggers due to its flip-up viewfinder and its small and compact size. Other people that might use it are people that want a compact stills camera but might do the occasional bit of video, such as a travel or adventure camera, or maybe just a family camera for shooting the kids in the playground. Here's an example of the quality of video that I just shot here in my local town yesterday. And this is what it'll get mostly used for, and that is handheld or vlogging or personal type YouTube videos, which it is really well suited for. The other thing you'll look for on this type of camera is you want a wide lens, so you can hold it at arm's length like I am doing now, preferably in the range of like 24 to 28 millimeters, and this camera has a 24mm lens. You don't really want to go any wider than 24mm because the wider the lens, the more unflattering it is to you. And of course it has to have good image stabilization if you're going to do a lot of handheld type shooting like this. So I'm walking and it actually does a pretty good job. Now I'm running. And walking. Right, let's cut to the chase. Here are the pros and cons that I found using this camera to shoot video. First up, the pros, or the good stuff. How good is the video out of this camera? It is good, very good in fact. As an example, let's swap this camera for that camera, which is my Canon 70D, and let's put this camera up in the same situation. And the Canon 70D again. This is a controlled environment, but I think it actually does a pretty good job. If you're using this camera as a vlogging camera, you're going to be shooting in a wide variety of conditions, and I have to say, with the testing I've done, it actually handles and does a remarkably good job. So what are the other pros? The flip-up LCD viewfinder actually does a pretty good job, and you'll be using the touch screen, or you'll probably mostly use the touch screen for adjusting focus. It has some manual controls, even though most of us will use this in full auto. It's good to have manual control in some tricky situations. You can lock the focus and exposure fairly quickly, which is great. The 1-inch sensor on this camera even allows you to get some lovely shallow depth of field video shots, which is very popular with the advent of DSLR type video filming. It actually works surprisingly well in low light. The picture quality might start breaking up or getting a bit grainy in very low light, but if it gets you the shot, that's fantastic. This camera has the option of shooting in either 30 frames a second or 60 frames a second, which actually allows you to get some good slow-mo. It's got a built-in ND filter, and this stops the auto exposure from setting really high shutter speeds, which can make your video look a bit twitchy. You can also use that to help achieve that shallow depth of field. As mentioned earlier, the image stabilization actually works really well on this camera because it will probably be predominantly used for handheld video shooting. It records to standard size SD cards, which I like, as opposed to the small micro SD cards, which I find a bit fiddly and a bit more time consuming when downloading footage. And now the cons, or the not such good things about using this camera to shoot video. Firstly, and this is a big one to me, the autofocus noise. This is my biggest single gripe about this camera, because if you're using it for such things as vlogging, it's all about the audio. And if you keep getting this annoying little clicking noise going on, it's not great. A common workaround for this type of problem is attaching an external mic, which brings me to my next con. And that is, it has no mic in jack, so you can't attach any other microphones to the camera, which unfortunately is not uncommon in the smaller compact type cameras these days. The autofocus is generally pretty good, but sometimes it can be slow and not fine focus sometimes. Battery life on this camera is not great. I've seen comparisons when shooting stills, and I don't know exactly what it is when shooting video, but it is not very good. You'll generally always need at least one spare battery with it. Now here's another con which really baffles me. This camera can only shoot in 30 frames a second or 60 frames a second, which are NTSC country frame rates. I live in a PAL country, which for those of you that don't know what that means, there's countries like Europe, most of Europe, Australia, New Zealand. We are PAL countries, which means our frame rates are 25 frames a second and 50 frames a second. There is also no 24 frames a second recording, which is a very common film-like video recording rate. So Canon, what's going on? Why have you only given us 30 and 60 frames a second? Even though the camera has an option in its video output for setting it between NTSC and PAL, that is really just, I guess, for playing it back on TVs. I guess it's not such a big deal these days with basically internet video delivery, but where it can become an issue is if you're trying to perhaps match this footage with another camera. For example, I'm shooting this on a Canon 70D, which is recording in PAL 25 frames a second, but this can only shoot in 30 frames a second. So some editing software, you may have problems matching or combining the two lots of footage. The other problem it may cause, and this is a bit of a funny technical one, is that the 30 frames and 60 frames a second are set up for NTSC countries which have 60 Hertz power. I'm in a PAL country shooting in 25 and 50 frames, and we have 50 Hertz power. So recording in an NTSC frame rate, you may get flicker under our lights because of the power difference. Here are the modifications that I've made to the Canon G7X for shooting video. Firstly, I've superglued a piece of felt over the camera's microphone, as even the slightest bit of wind unfortunately will get picked up and destroy your audio. It doesn't eliminate it, but it certainly helps. There's actually a company that makes small little fluffies to help this problem, and I'll put a link to it in the description. I found the standard color picture profile would sometimes give people such as myself with a perhaps not perfect or flawless complexion would make us look really red, which is not very flattering. So I went into the custom color menu and I adjusted it. I went contrast -1, saturation -1, red -1, and skin tone -1. This seemed to work well for me, and you may want to go into that menu and adjust it for your own personal preference. So to sum it all up, after having owned and shot on this camera and giving it a pretty good workout over the past 3 months, I have to say I actually really quite like it. I think it does a pretty good job of shooting video, given that it's actually its primary function as a compact stills camera. So I guess the whole point of having this type of camera for shooting video is essentially its small and compact size so that you have it with you at all times, but not at the cost of usability or image quality. If I'm vlogging, I can have this camera with me pretty much most of the time. I put it in a small camera bag which has a spare battery, and I clip it to my belt, which I know is a great look. But that's the whole point of this style of camera, is small, compact, and have it with you most of the time. As I mentioned earlier, my biggest bugbear with this camera though is the autofocus clicking noise that the microphone picks up. You'll get away with it in noisier environments, but it is not good in quiet environments. So overall, I'm actually pretty impressed with the camera. It is a great little camera for shooting video. Is it perfect? No. Is it good? Yes. And would I recommend it? Yes, I would. So I hope you found this video review useful. Likes and subscribes to my channel are always much appreciated, and thanks for watching.